here at Dundee Language Chamber, just to do a bit of a kind of recap on what the Chamber is doing right now. So Alison, would you like to take over from me, please?
Thanks, Keith. That's great. So welcome to everybody that's joined us on Zoom and those of you that are watching us on Facebook Live and other platforms. The Chamber, like lots of businesses, has been looking at what it does as an organisation, and obviously we support more than 800 members and lots of non-members navigate their way through coronavirus, current climates, and that's even without us even talking about the B word. So, but this is a month where it's really important for us to be looking at what's happening with Brexit, and it's definitely also a month where businesses are beginning to look at what am I doing now, what should I be doing now, what am I doing next, and creating some new plans. So I'm really looking forward to today's session. Our Chamber's been doing 4 webinars a week, and we start off on a Tuesday with a member-only networking session. And those of you that know Chambers know that really face-to-face networking and events is really in the DNA of what we do. And taking those online has been really successful. So we've been using a mixture of Microsoft Teams and Zoom to do sessions. We've been doing lots of networking, and we've been connecting members and helping them build their own networks and build those relationships, but also talk to us about what's going on with them and how they're finding the current crisis. So Tuesday afternoon sees us do our DAC 123 networking sessions. And then on a Tuesday evening, we're doing a Guide to series. So we've done things like a guide to finance, we've done a guide to cybersecurity in COVID world, and this week was a guide to engaging online content. So we looked at how do you use social media at the moment, how do you plan, what platforms do you use, what strategies do you employ, and also we had another member talk to us about how you can use digital animation to really make your stories pop. So lots of our members are coming on and sharing their stories with us as well, which is great. On a Wednesday, we have a session which is about supporting people, and we started that one off with a mental health and wellbeing session weeks and weeks and weeks ago now, but that topic is just hugely important. So whether it's been that you're thinking about how to motivate people while you're all sat at your dining tables or kind of remotely, or whether you're thinking about remote working, we've covered all sorts of topics like that on our Wednesday session. And then Thursday, which is the session that you're seeing today, is all about how to support the business rather than the people in the business. And we've looked at the coronavirus business support, we've looked at strategy, planning. Last week was all about thinking about leading through recovery and what your plans and your mindset might and could and should be. So lots and lots of interesting content, and our YouTube channel has never looked so healthy. So like a lot of businesses, we had an online presence, and we had an e-commerce shop of a sort, because we would sell tickets for our events online. But our online content could have always done with improvement, and our webinars and our team have been just fantastic at jumping in and getting our webinar program going. And we early on decided the right thing to do was to record all that content and put that on our YouTube channel. So yeah, and it's seen lots and lots of people be able to access that content that hadn't previously been or had time to kind of take a bit of time during the day to stop. So yeah, lots of things like that going on. The Chamber's also has got a COVID hub, like many people do, and this week has seen some really vital content added to that. So a bit more information about the Scottish Government's Test and Trace, Test and Protect campaign that's happening. Also the grant funding, so the Scottish Government grant funding that's available through local authorities has been further extended, and that went live this week. So if you're in co-working premises, or you share premises, or you don't have your own rates bill because of the relationship you have with your landlord, you are now eligible for that funding. It's been widened. However, if there's a sting in the tail, it's that the Scottish Government have been constantly working with the UK government in amending what that support looks like, and so there isn't an unending pot of money, and the governments are having to look at what money is already been utilised, what has been earmarked, what's not been taken up, and what can be moved. So there's now a deadline for those grant applications of the 10th of July. So if you're eligible for those grants and you haven't applied yet, please go and track down that link for your local authority and get your application in. The local authorities are really on top of their applications, and certainly we know from talking to Angus and Dundee and Perth local authorities and the other ones local, you know, there's not a big backlog. But if you've put an application in and you've not heard, come and tell us, and we'll talk to them and see if we can't get things moving for you. And we've been successful in helping businesses who've hit a few you know, road bumps along the way in getting that support that they need. So lots of support available, but you do have to access it, and you've got to think about the future while you're doing all of that. So who says running a business is an easy life? It's absolutely not. So I think that's really all from me. I'm looking forward to our discussion today, because international trade forms a really key part of what the Chamber Network's doing, and Stuart is going to talk more about that. And Dundee and Angus Chambers are really looking forward to helping businesses make meaningful global trade connections in Dubai, in the Netherlands, in Scandinavia and in the US. So there's not a corner of the world that the Chamber Network can't connect you into. And I hope I haven't stolen all Stuart's thunder when I've said that. So Stuart, once I can hear you, I'll mute, get out of the way, and it's over to you.
Okay, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, thanks very much for this opportunity to speak to you this morning. For those that don't know me, my focus at Scottish Chambers of Commerce is international trade, and I've been asked to speak about two topics this morning, so I'm going to spend about 10 minutes on each before we hand over to Andy. First of all, I've been asked to speak about what we believe is happening in Asia and the Middle East at the moment, and then I'm going to move on to the Chamber Network's approach to trade missions in the current environment. And we have a very exciting program, actually. So for those that might think nothing's happening at the moment, it's quite the reverse. But to look at Asia and the Middle East first, the first thing I should say is that anything I'm going to say now is based on the experience on the ground that Scottish Chambers and Scottish Chambers Network has, using our global network and our partners throughout the world. So there's plenty of information on government websites about the percentages of the opportunities to trade abroad and so on. But what I'm going to speak about really is just more about the conversations that we're having just now, and giving us a feel for what's happening in the East. Well, as you can see from this slide that is up at the moment, the Scottish Chamber Network has a global reach and has quite a presence and a good set of relationships in Asia and the Middle East. So before I say any more, I think that although we're talking about post-Brexit here, there's a lot that's up in the air at the moment. I don't think we can divorce it completely from post-COVID-19 either, because the challenges that we're going to be facing in doing international trade are going to be dependent on both. So let me talk about the connections that we've got at the moment, where we get our information from. Then I'll give you an idea of the feel that we're getting from these countries about how they're coming out of COVID and what they expect post-Brexit. And then I'll go into the missions. So first of all, if we're looking at the map there, and we'll not zoom in on it, but Scottish Chambers of Commerce itself has connections, strong connections in China with the CCPIT, which is the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade. And we hosted a mission from them just the end of last year, actually, about 25 strong, that came over to look at how we might develop further our relationship with China. Scotland has quite a good relationship with China, actually, particularly with the ambassador to the UK, Liu Xiaoming. We're also connected and have regular conversations with the British Chamber of Commerce, British Chamber of Commerce Philippines, and we have offices in Jakarta in Indonesia and Yantai. As you'll be aware, Dundee has a very, very strong relationship with Dubai. Glasgow is looking at opening up a partnership with an agent to represent them in Hangzhou in China, and also have a very, very strong relationship with Shanghai. And Edinburgh Chamber has a very strong relationship with Shenzhen. We also are in regular contact with SDI abroad, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and with the Department of International Trade. and we sit, Scottish Chambers sits on the cross-party groups for Japan and China, the Scottish Government. So this is where all our information is coming from, and we're in touch with these on a very regular basis. Also, FICI, the FICCI, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. So, what is the feeling at the moment? Well, things are starting to open up again in the Middle East. And before all this happened, before coronavirus hit, myself and our Deputy Chief Executive, Chandeep Singh, were having regular meetings at Scottish Chambers offices with envoys, consuls and ambassadors who were, this was before the outcome of Brexit, wanting to build these relationships with Scotland, regardless of which way it went, whether there was a deal or no deal. So regardless of deal or no deal, there was a real appetite from Asia and the Middle East to engage with Scotland. But they made it quite clear, of course, that they couldn't really move forward until they knew what that outcome was. Well, now, of course, we do. So I believe that there's still a great opportunity to move forwards. Now, of course, we don't know what the trade agreements are going to be like yet. Nobody knows, and I can't give you any better information than anybody else could. But we do know from the discussions that we've had that there is a willingness to strike them. So regardless of where we're going to be, we do need to be thinking ahead now about when the negotiations are finished and when the markets start to open up again properly from COVID. How are we going to engage with these countries? Because there is a real willingness. Now, as it's happened at the moment, you may be aware that the Middle East and Asia are starting to reduce their restrictions now. The Middle East is returning to work on the 15th of June with social distancing. And Asia is well advanced actually in getting back to sort of some sense of normality. And if we don't actually try to engage with these countries now, we'll be missing a trick, because they're ready to look at how we can start trading again. In particular, China has been quite open with Scottish Chambers about the fact that they're concerned about the willingness of Europe to deal with them in future. And we of course don't want that to be a barrier. We want to be engaging with China. Japan is third on the list of the UK government's target areas for free trade agreements. So it's going to be extremely important for us. Now, of course, one of the things that will change is documentation. And at this stage, we don't know what documentation is going to be required. But of course, Dundee and Angus Chamber and 7 other chambers can help you with that when the time comes. So I think that I was in an interesting webinar with the Department of International Trade about 3 weeks ago, when they were talking about routes to market, and they showed 7 routes to market from memory, and one of them was trade missions. And the speaker said, of course, we're not going to be looking at trade missions at all, because they're dead for the next 12 months. And that is the complete reverse of the attitude that we're taking at Scottish Chambers of Commerce, because we believe there's a great opportunity just now to forge ahead with virtual missions. And so I'd like to spend just a few minutes to tell you what we're planning to do to engage with countries across the world, but also Asia, including Asia and the Middle East. So could we put the next slide up, please, if you don't mind? There we go, thanks. Well, most of you will probably be aware that last May in 2019, the Scottish Government announced its Trading Nation plan, the Export Growth Plan for Scotland. And that was a programme with a £20 million fund with the intention of growing GDP, Scottish GDP, from exporting, to grow it from 20% to 25% over the next 10 years. So that was finishing in 2029. The government had a list of 15 countries that were preferred. Some of the Asian countries were in there. China was certainly in there. And this programme started last year, and it was extremely ambitious. Could we go on to the next slide, please? And out of that £20 million fund, Scottish Chamber Network was given £2 million with the intention of running trade missions, inward and outward trade missions, over the next 3 years, finishing in March 2022. But that, because of COVID, has now been extended to March 2023. So we've still got 3 years to go. We have run approximately 20 missions since this started. And the aim of the International Trade Partnership 2, as it was called, ITP2, was to align with the aims and the objectives of the trading nation, the 15 principal markets. So we were actually given the remit that we could run trade missions and align that with the export growth plan, with only 70% of the money having to be focused on these top 15 markets. The other 30% is available, and still is available, for us as a chamber network to approach new markets that we feel are going to be worthwhile. So where members actually potentially, or the chamber themselves, see an opportunity for a new marketplace, money is available to run trade missions to these countries, and we have been doing that. The criteria that sits around this ITP2 mission plan for to 2023 is that there has to be a minimum of 8 Scottish businesses participating with the foreign companies that we're dealing with. The missions have to be cross-sectoral, so that we were not running food and drink missions or oil and gas missions. They have to be multi-sectoral. Usually about 2 or 3 sectors we would be looking at, so that we don't spread our net too wide and dilute the offering. The missions are aimed at Scottish businesses that have a turnover of 7 million or 7.5 million, it actually is, or less, and who are new to the market that they want to export to. But this is not exclusive. If you are running a larger company that turns over more than that, or you've traded in that market before, you can still join one of these trade missions. It's just that the criteria for the chamber itself is that it has to have a minimum of 8 Scottish businesses who are under that. So it might well be that 12 businesses are involved. 8 of them have a turnover of less than 7 million. The other 4 have a greater turnover, or already in that marketplace. Now, as you can imagine, this was turned on its head slightly when COVID-19 struck, because we had about 20 missions planned to go abroad this year, and of course all international travel was stopped. So we turned our attentions instead to virtual trade missions, and we've had a bit of, I think it's fair to say, quite long discussions with Scottish Government over the last few months in order to get adequate funding for virtual trade missions, because they still have to be set up. Could you put the next slide up, please? They still have to be set up professionally and with the same objectives and aims that physical trade missions have. So after several months of discussion, the government agreed that the virtual missions were the way to go. And the exciting thing about them, I think, is that it gives companies who want to engage abroad the opportunity to do so online first, to see whether or not that marketplace is appropriate for them, rather than having to commit the cost and sometimes, more importantly, the time in going abroad to discover whether or not that marketplace is appropriate for them. And as you can imagine, running a trade mission to somewhere like China is quite a big undertaking, because it's not so much the time in cost in getting there. It's not the cost of getting there, it's the time that you need to take out. You need to take a week out of your diary in order to go there. But with virtual missions, you have the opportunity to have one-to-one, business-to-business meetings with potential partners, distributors, agents, or customers or clients in that country before you actually go out there and commit yourself to any cost whatsoever. So we've just started to embark on these virtual missions. They're going to form the main part of Scottish Chamber Network's approach to international trade over the next 9 months at least. And the intention would be that if the missions are successful, which they have proved to be, because a couple have been run so far and have been very successful indeed in creating connections and business opportunities, that these will be followed up then with a physical trade mission, inward or outward, when the time comes for us to be able to do that again. And that could be some way down the line. But what it does mean is that we can establish these connections now and begin to build these relationships and these business opportunities before we actually have to go out there. So At the moment, as of yesterday, we have across the network 30 virtual trade missions planned for the next year. And they're not just going to be simple Zoom meetings, because anyone could do that, but the network is going to be taking this much more seriously and arranging conference type facilities so that you can establish what kind of companies you would like to speak to. The chambers will be arranging doing things like some of the market research and creating these B2B meetings for you, so that when you go online, you're speaking to people that you want to speak to. You are creating these relationships for a visit further on down the line. And we'll be giving post support as well, with a view to going over there when the time comes. So it's still a business to business focused set of missions. They are worldwide. They go from the USA to Europe to Africa to the Middle East, Far East. Dundee and Angus itself has a number of these planned, as do Edinburgh and Perthshire and Glasgow. But you can join any of these that you want to. These are open to all Scottish businesses, whether they're Scottish Chamber members or not. So although an individual chamber might lead in a mission, any Scottish business that's eligible to join is free to do so. And I know that the other chambers will be promoting Dundee and Angus's missions, and Dundee and Angus will be promoting the other missions. So you will get information on what's been run over the year. We have created a portal. We did this actually just before COVID, where we're going to be able to show all the missions that are available throughout the coming year. We haven't quite put that live yet, because now that we're running this in a slightly different way, we want to be able to post the information up slightly differently. But the portal will go live in June, and I know that your chamber will be providing the link to that, which will mean you'll be able to log on at any time and see what's happening across the chamber network and express your interest in any of these missions. There is no cost attached to them whatsoever. And even when they further on down the line become physical missions, the only cost that's attached to these missions is the cost of travel and accommodation. So the chamber network bears the cost through grant funding from the government for consultancy, market research, and setting up the B2B meetings for you. Travel subvention could also be available from SDI, so there's a real possibility that the missions could be of absolutely minimal cost altogether. So I think that to wind this up, I would say that we feel at Scottish Chambers and across the network that the opportunities for international trade are extremely exciting. Scotland is leading the way in this. We do know that many other countries are not forging ahead with virtual missions in the same way that we are, but we've got substantial funding for it, and we're going to make a real go of this. So this could be a fantastic opportunity for you to put the first toe in the water, to establish the connect, to look at the markets that you want to go to. You can take part in multiple missions and test the water to see what's best for you, what works for you and what doesn't, and your chamber will support you all the way. I think that's all I would like to say at this stage. I'm happy to take questions later on if they come up, but I think at this point I'd now like to hand over to Andy Whittick to take it to speak about his subject. I think you're in mute. Yeah.
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks Dundee and Angus Chamber for having me on today. My name is Andy Whittick, and my company is Kinnis Shipping. We're based here in Dundee. We are ships agents and freight forwarders, freight forwarding being the topic that we're going to cover today. We're looking at what does a post-Brexit environment look like in terms of trade with Europe, and possibly some of the things that might come up, pitfalls, and what do we need to do now in terms of getting ourselves ready. It's a good time to start talking about this. Negotiations are still ongoing, so we don't have any concrete knowledge of exactly how that's going to look. But certainly in the news today, we've heard that we need to be making some plans, that the government need to be pushing and working a little bit harder for us in order to make it a bit easier for companies after Brexit. And if we go out with a no deal, potentially that could be damaging. for a lot of companies, and certainly smaller companies who trade within the EU. Like I say, Kinnis Shipping, we are freight forwarders, and we are part of the British International Trade Association and the International Federation for Freight Forwarders. You would think that that would give us inside knowledge on what's happening, but unfortunately there's not a lot coming out at the moment, and until we find out exactly how the government are getting on with their negotiations, we really won't know much. But what the plan today is to give you an outline, like I said, of what to look out for and what you can do now. First of all, looking at what would post-Brexit look like. We don't know is the short answer. Currently, well, it's pretty simple. You can arrange goods to be collected in a country, you can go and pick them up, and you can have a van or a lorry or a truck bring them all the way back to Scotland, and it can be as simple as that. Depending on what happens, potentially that could be the case with some goods, possibly not if we have no deal, and we are then subject to trade tariffs and that sort of thing. Then that potentially could be difficult. So how would that look? Well, we know how we trade with other companies. So for example, China. We know what we need to do for those countries, and it's worth preparing ourselves as if that is the outcome. It could be the case that we are going to need extra paperwork, extra checks, customs clearances, trade tariffs in terms of VAT and duty may be applicable for all commodities, if not, like I've said, some commodities. And it's a case of let's make sure that we're ready for that. But like I said, negotiations are ongoing, so we don't really know where we're going to end up. It falls into two main categories, time and money. Time-wise, well, will things take a little bit longer? Will goods take a little bit longer to arrive? Will the process of arranging goods and having things ready be a little bit longer? And money as well. What are the extra costs for completing paperwork? What are the extra costs potentially for VAT and duty that may be placed on certain goods? So that's really where we are at the moment with it. Increases through VAT and duty. So that's one thing that may come up and probably will come up if we reach a no trade deal. As we know, when we trade outside the EU at the moment, things are subject to trade tariffs, and that will be what you need to factor in to when you're looking at your business plan and for any costs that you're looking at now. Time-wise, checks at borders, like we've said, paperwork issues. What we need to be thinking about really at the moment is how do you plan for that, and how do you know what's going to happen? And I think that really is where we need to be looking at. So really, let's look at what we can do and how we can go for that. First of all, when at the moment you have a supplier, for example, importing, and you go to your supplier and you may say that you have goods that you want to collect, you pick them up, you bring them back to the UK, we're going to need to be spending more time beforehand looking at how do we, looking at the length of time it takes to get that to the point where you can collect it, looking at the length of time it's going to take to arrange for haulage, arrange for cargo, arrange for drivers, looking at the length of time it's going to take for it actually to come back here and cross a border as well. And right at the beginning of all of these the talks, there was a lot of doom and gloom in terms of the length of queues at borders, for example, the length of time that it would take to cross a border, systems and processes that are not quite up to standard at the moment, because really, like I've said, at the moment you can nip across a border, pick something up and bring it back. the companies that are bringing cargo back and forward, the haulage companies, the freight companies, they're still going to be trading. So what we're saying is it's not likely that we're going to see massive breakdown costs in terms of haulage. Probably aren't going to change too much. But again, time is the factor, and making sure that we've got that. A lot of customers of ours can sometimes not, I don't mean leave it to the last minute, but arrange for goods to be collected at the time that they're running out. So again, another thing to think about there would be making sure that you've got plenty of time to pick things up. Logistics and costs that way, again, probably no real change in that, no real change in the availability, but as we'll come on to a little bit later, we may find problems with that.
Andy, we've got a question from Stuart, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Stuart, do you want to unmute yourself?
I just want, is there any indication of any government funding to assist your industry if there's no deal?
Not that that's not necessarily my level of expertise. I don't know quite, as freight forwarders, we tend to arrange the logistics, so that's not something that is part of our remit. What I would suggest though, and as I'll come on to towards the end of this, there are places that you can go to access advice and to access information. In terms of that, we would be looking at the British International Freight Association, who have got lots of advice on what to do, where to go, and gov.uk as well is always a great source, as well as the Dundee Chamber, who will be fantastic in assisting with all things in terms of that. What I would say though, in terms of funding or in terms of business planning, it is wise to make sure that you're factoring these things in, like VAT and duty payments, and how do they manifest themselves in your business plan or with your customers. So on that, there's, like I said, no real change in logistics. If we can imagine that things are probably going to continue to move as they did before, with potential delays, so we factor in time. If we don't have a trade deal, then we're looking at extra costs in terms of potentially VAT, duty, and paperwork costs. So that's why it's really important that, although we don't know where we're going to end up with this, to start planning and preparing for these things now. What we've been saying to our customers is getting yourself prepared as early as possible, you mentioned. When you trade outside the EU, there are certain things that you need to look for and to make sure that you've got available to you. First thing is an EORI number, an economic registration identification number, and that is what is required for trading outside the EU. Now, if we have no deal, there's we completely split from the EU, and that will or may or will be required. So it's worth getting these things in early and making sure that you've got that. And that's just basically a number, a registration identification number that assigns you to trade. Important for that one. Know your product is another thing that we have been advising our customers. Certainly when you trade, for example, with China, you tend to know your product in a lot of detail because you need to state it on documents, you need to have information on the actual making of the product so that you can get the correct tariff code and you can pay the correct VAT and duty. And if that comes in, which it likely will, we will need to really have that information right from the very beginning, because if you are taking time to sort out things like URI, if you're taking time to sort out what your trade tariff is, you're potentially looking at a breakdown in your supply there. So again, going to the gov.uk website would be the advice, and really working out what is the product you're importing or exporting, and where does it sit within that. And it can be a fairly complicated process, it can be fairly simple, there's lots of things to click on, and if you're not familiar with it, then absolutely get familiar with that process. Again, planning for duty and VAT, how does that get paid? if you are stuck with these charges and you have to pay for them as soon as they come in, do you have the cash up front? Do you have the cash flow in your business to pay for them straight away? 20% on a product that was free before, are you able to pay for that? Duty, depending on where the trade and the negotiations go, do you have the ability to pay for that straight away? You need to plan for that, and how then does that get either passed on or swallowed by your own company? Other things to think about as well when paying for these things, and as we know from trade overseas, can you defer VAT and duty? Is there, can you set up, well, you can set up a deferment account, there's a cost to that through the government, or can you take that through a freight forwarder or somebody else who has a deferment account, which allows you to get your goods quickly without having to pay the VAT and duty straight away. So these are all things to think about, and it does sound like an awful lot, but if you start to plan now and factor in how these are going to go, it will certainly help in the long run. When we are looking at not having these things in place and not being prepared, because like I say, at the moment, currently, it's fairly simple to hire a man in a lorry to pick up your goods and bring them across the UK. It's going to be another couple of steps. If you don't have these things in place, well, that's when we're looking at delays. That's when we're looking at potential problems when things get to the UK. As you may know or may not know, you will be charged for any extra time that it takes to get things taken off into the UK, into your premises, or the other way. And if everything is as slick as it can be, and these things are in place, then we're reducing those charges, we're reducing wasted time charges. So really, going back to the beginning, time and money are the two main factors that we need to pay attention on. It sounds a bit doom and gloom, but it's really not, because if we pay attention to this and if we make sure that we are prepared, it really isn't it shouldn't be as big a problem as it may sound. So just to clarify then, what we're basically saying is have a good relationship, and a lot of you probably will have a good relationship with your supplier or with the receiver of your goods. They're going to be in the same position as we are, certainly in Europe, trading with the UK. They don't want to turn their back on us, or I can't imagine they want to turn their back on us. So together we're going to have to find a solution and a way to work around this, and building that relationship now, putting the steps in place, knowing your product, and knowing a haulier or whatever it may be that can help you out with that is going to be really key. So not just time on, we're looking at now then relationships that we're building now that will help us as we improve. And again, that's where likes of Gov.uk, the Dundee and Angus Chamber, can help forge these relationships with you and put you in touch with the people that can really help. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's been an interesting one because we don't really know, but I think if we look to what we do know, which is how we trade with, for example, China and other countries that aren't EU, or all countries that aren't EU, we can have a good guess as to how things might look. It may not quite be at that level. We may find there are certain negotiations in between and different nuances within that. But certainly taking that as a worst case and working back and factoring in what we know is going to be the best place to. Advice, like I say, we'd always go with Dundee and Angus Chamber, BIFA, and certainly ourselves as well. We are, for Chamber members, more than happy for people just to give us a call, and we will chat for as long as you like on your product specifics. It's difficult to go into exactly what everybody's product is and what different things will look like, but we are more than happy to talk with you about any kind of aspect of that. And I think just being prepared as much as you can is the important part, and looking to how we prepare or how we trade with non-EU countries is the best way to go about that. And like I say, yeah, if anyone's got any questions, more than happy to give them a go.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Andy. I know that Alison is burning with questions to ask you, so I'll invite her first, and then we'll see if anyone else has anything.
Now you feel set up, don't you? Sorry, no.
No, that's all right.
No, I mean, it's really interesting, and I think there's a couple of things probably. One's a bit more of an observation. I mean, we've been working with SDI and local authorities and whatnot, talking about Brexit, it feels, for a long time. And one of the things that came up last year about this time actually was the worry about logistics and goods moving around, and how potentially, you know, European hauliers might not want to be bringing goods into the UK just because of, you know, possible delays at port. So I'm sort of interested if that is still bubbling around under the surface. And then I've got another question about opportunities. So
okay. I'll do your first one first. It is an issue, and it is something that it's always in the background there. You know, even now, do European logistics companies want to send a driver over to the UK with the potential that they don't have the contacts to pick up a job to bring cargo back, to make it most effective for them? So it's not a new problem in terms of, okay, it's come after Brexit. It's always sort of been there. More, I would say, of an issue with that will be if there are certain paperwork implications, or if we have to go through certain hoops for bringing things in or out of the country. Certainly road freight, if at the moment it's very simple, and you can take a driver from any European country who maybe doesn't speak very good English, and a customs officer who maybe doesn't speak very good another language, it's fairly simple to get through, and these are the goods, and this is it. If you have a driver who maybe doesn't know what the document is, or isn't as familiar with it because they've only been trading, you know, in Spain, for example, or driving in Spain, and they come over here, that's potentially when we're looking at problems in terms of delays at borders. But to answer your question, yeah, it's always been an issue having drivers from Europe to come over here without their knowledge that they're going to get a cargo, and usually they do. And what we've said to our customers certainly is, and this was sort of almost true with the COVID as well, is that a lot of these companies are very big, and they do not want to miss out on any opportunity to work or to send drivers around UK, Europe. So they'll be doing everything they can as well. But yes, that is potentially part of why we're saying plan ahead, and don't leave it too late to require a product. Don't leave your supply chain or your supplies to your customers in jeopardy because you left it too late. Give yourself that extra week, give yourself the extra couple of weeks, and it may be that you have to order more regularly or sooner than you thought than you are doing now. Possibly, I don't know. But yeah, it is one of these questions, and if you are over here as a driver and are left without another job, then it's always going to be a problem, especially if you've waited and lost time at a border. It is something that we'll need to think about. But again, that's part of the time factor, and factor that in, and give yourself the opportunity to shop around a bit as well and see who's available.
Okay, so then the next bit about opportunities then, I'm just interested, Andy, I guess, in the sectors and the industries that you currently work with, or where you see there being major opportunities post-Brexit. You know, are there key markets that are big plays for, say, you know, the local food and drink industry, or you know, the others that you work with?
It's difficult to say. Again, it's not something we necessarily get involved with too much in terms of supply and demand. We tend to offer a logistics package based on the needs of our customers. So it's really driven by our customers. We operate in certain sectors We do something drink, which is UK and European, and we do lots of other imports and things like that are, it's really quite a broad spectrum, but it's not really my remit, if you like, to speculate on where would be good or not, and it's or commodities or business opportunities there. It's not something that I would really be that knowledgeable on, I'm afraid, because, like I say, we tend to be driven purely by our customer, and from that point of view, it's quite mixed. It can be a lot of something one week and something completely different the next. So it's difficult for us really to track that from a customer point of view.
So I've had a question come in just for both of you to answer, and you can both kind of like comment on it. How do businesses find or connect with distributors in a market they want to engage in? If either of you have got thoughts on that.
Can I take that first?
Yep.
That's part and parcel of the service that would come through the International Trade Partnership Programme, the missions. The B2B meetings that are a requirement of the mission programme are not necessarily always focused on meeting a customer. They're equally focused on helping people to find distributors or agents in that particular country. So it's any kind of B2B meeting that would help to develop the business at all. So if a company is looking to develop its services or products into another foreign marketplace and is interested in joining one of the virtual missions that we're running with a view to the real missions later on, part and parcel of that would be the business-to-business matching that the Chamber would provide, where we'd be working with you to identify suitable contacts to speak to. And this is again where the virtual missions could help, because you could actually make contact with these people and sound each other out, I suppose, before you have to make the trip over there to do that. And I think that's really quite important, because we have had some experience in the past of people coming to us and saying, look, I set up a distributor in India, for example, and I didn't research it properly, and now that we've got to the point where we're ready to do business, they're now turning the screw a little bit, looking for more money. If that can be better sorted out and better fleshed out in advance, so that when you actually take it further down the line, it's more set in stone, then it's going to be a much better place to be. So the Chamber network can help with that. We can work with you to see, who should you be speaking to. We can make that contact, and we can do that through the virtual missions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Stuart. Andy, do you have anything to add to that?
In terms of distribution, and in terms of my area, which would be carrying cargo of all kinds, I would really suggest that it's important, again, to get in touch with a local freight forwarder. There's a plug, or anybody who is in that industry who can help you. What we tend to have is a network of other businesses, other colleagues that we know up and down the country, and if it's something specific, certainly we do a lot of one-offs. An example being an out of gauge large piece of cargo. We can put you in touch with the correct shipping company. We can help you with cargo at both ends, collection and delivery. And I would say that building the relationship, again, with your supplier, knowing who you're buying from, or knowing who you're selling to, so that you can arrange all these details, and like Stuart touched on there, knowing in advance how the process is going to work, and finalising the details beforehand is very important, to know what's going to come out at the other end, and how the job's going to go, if you like. So yeah, build those relationships. Put a little bit of extra time into the planning of it, even if it's something that sounds quite simple, and make sure that all details are worked out. Go through an independent, a third party, if you like, just to make sure all the boxes are checked, and that there's going to be no hidden issues, and everything goes smoothly out.
Perfect, thank you very much. So I've just received another little message. I don't know if It's from Ian Collins. I don't know if he's wanting to come in and speak on it, or if you would just like me to discuss it. So I'll give him a second. If he doesn't come in, I'll just announce it. Cool.
I can speak.
Perfect.
So just very quickly, there's I work for Bank of Scotland as well as obviously my role in the Chamber, and the Bank of Scotland has an international trade portal, which will give you some of that information that that person asked the question was looking for. So it provides you with some data on the opportunity in some of the markets, and it also gives you some other contacts and gives you some of the sort of start documentation and things like the shows that are taking place. It's free for anybody for 30 days, and it's free for our customers forever.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Ian. So I don't think I have any more questions at the moment, but we're doing pretty good for time. Imagine one of our webinars finishing on time. That's a new one. So just a last little thing before we kind of if we give everyone a chance to bring in any more questions, would be the Dundee and Angus Chamber, as well as the wider Chamber network, are starting to offer more custom declaration training. This is to do with focusing more on, there's going to be changes with Brexit. We don't know quite what they're going to do yet and what they are going to be, but getting yourself trained up on custom declaration is really important. It will just give you a more firm standing when going into the unknown, and it'll just make you feel a bit more confident. So we do highly recommend that. We are going to be sharing that in this webinar. And it's just something that's really quite useful to get yourself trained up on. The Dundee and Angus Chamber next week is also going to be offering a export drop-in. So this is more for our documentation service, but it's quite a good thing to come into to speak on and speak to the team and learn just a little bit more about how, how the better way to do docs is, and the changes that we're starting to already see, and like kind of the new normals are starting to get put in place. I'll just quickly check and see if I've got any more questions. I don't think we have any more.
Can I just make one final point?
Of course.
It's just that I sit in a lot of webinars myself as an attendee, and the question comes up from time to time from people saying, is this a good time to be looking at international trade? Should we not just be focusing on our, the problems we have at home? But I really couldn't stress enough in the conversations that we're having with these organisations that I mentioned earlier on, just how much interest there is in trade with Scotland. And now is the time to be thinking ahead. And yes, there are problems at home and things that we need to sort out. But in the longer run, or in the medium term, we're going to be trading internationally again. And if we act now and plan properly for the future, then Scotland can certainly be in a much better place than many other countries will be when all this is over, Brexit and or COVID-19. So I really strongly believe there are great opportunities now for companies that are serious about trading abroad, want to make the proper, sensible plans to do so. So it's a great time to be doing it. It might not seem like it, but I think that we're really at the forefront of the virtual mission side of things. And I think we should, really be looking at that seriously.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Stuart, but then you wouldn't be surprised with that either. But we've obviously been looking at international connections and how we use the Chamber network to its best ability. And the Chamber brand is one that's been around for a long time, and it's trusted. We've got connections in all the corners that people could be looking to make global trade links in. But we kind of moved over, well, will people want to do virtual B2B connecting? How will they feel about that? But actually, as we're all now completely used to doing Zoom sessions from our dining tables and our spare bedrooms and wherever, the rest of the world is in exactly the same position where we want to be making good connections. And okay, nothing beats face-to-face, I think, but opening a conversation where you can actually talk to somebody and you spend an hour with them, you can be very productive with that time, you know what you want to talk about, and you can actually really start to make those connections is going to be more easy than ever, because apart from time differences where you might have to get up a wee bit earlier or stay up a bit late, more people overseas will be keen to talk to us than ever. And I think this is the time to use that time wisely and just explore it, because no longer do you have to think about the big cost and time expense of maybe taking a week out of your diary to go and explore some markets and talk to people, with the costs of accommodation and travel and all of that comes along with it. So yeah, we would encourage as many people that are serious about making these international trade connections as possible just to get in touch with us. The Chamber network is full of connections, whether it's with professional services that can advise you about setting up businesses and the legalities of doing trade in overseas markets, or whether actually what we do is just connect you to somebody in that market that used to be from Dundee or from Glasgow or whatever corner of the world they're from, or whether it's, you know, you're able to utilise the services of the organisations like Bank of Scotland that have got these great trade portals, or the freight forwarders and all of the connections that are there. You know, the business network is really, really, really keen to help us all do more business. So yeah, while local and buy local is hugely important for the Chamber network, and we want you to keep getting your local deliveries from the fruit and veg and all of the local independent retailers and others that we've all been doing during coronavirus, you know, our customers are ready to buy from us overseas too. So yeah, I think that's my preamble to kind of finish off, and I'm going to hand back to Keith again, but thank you.
No, thank you very much for that, Alison. So I think that is us for today. Thank you to both our speakers for a really engaging conversation, and thank you to everyone that submitted questions there. Do feel free to keep checking in on all of our webinar programs, and we look forward to seeing you at another Dundee and Angus Chamber of Commerce event. So hope you all have a good day.
Thank you.
Well done, Keith. Thank you.
Thanks.